Okay, let's talk about a massive shift that's happening in the world of corporate responsibility. It's coming straight out of the European Union, and it is poised to completely redefine what it means for a business to be accountable, not just for what happens within its own four walls, but across its entire global reach. Right, so what we're talking about is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, or as you'll hear it called, the CSDDD, and trust me, this is a real game changer. Why? Because it basically says companies are responsible not just for their own actions, but for what happens across their entire chain of activities. Think about that. Their suppliers, their partners, their distributors, the whole shebang. And this, right here, is the core question the CSDD is forcing companies to finally answer. How do you build real, tangible accountability for human rights abuses or environmental damage, no matter where it happens in your supply chain? This is a huge pivot away from, voluntary standards and toward mandatory, legally enforceable action. So, how is all of this actually going to work? Well, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the big picture, this new era of accountability. Then, we're going to walk step by step through the CSDD's six-part due diligence framework, all the way to what happens when things actually go wrong. So it's really important to get this. The CSDD isn't just another layer of bureaucracy. It's a whole framework designed to weave human rights and environmental sustainability directly into the way companies are run. The end goal here is to make responsible business conduct the default, not just a nice to have. Now, here's a super important legal idea you have to understand. It's called the obligation of means. The CSDD isn't asking for the impossible. It doesn't expect a company to guarantee with 100% certainty that nothing bad will ever happen in its supply chain. Instead, it requires them to take all appropriate measures. It's all about proving you've got the right processes and you're genuinely making the effort. So, the heart of this entire directive is a mandatory 6-step process that companies will absolutely have to follow. Let's walk through that framework right now. And here it is. The directive lays out this very clear 6-step process. You can think of it as a continuous cycle, right? You start by integrating it into your policies, then you identify and prevent risks, and then you monitor, communicate, and fix things when you need to. This is the exact roadmap we'll be following for the rest of this explainer. Okay, let's get into it, starting with step 1. This is all about laying a solid foundation by weaving due diligence into the very fabric of the company itself. The key takeaway here is that due diligence can't just be a side project in some forgotten department. No, it has to be baked into everything: your purchasing, your HR, your overall strategy. This means creating a formal policy and, really important, doing it with input from your employees. It also means rolling out a code of conduct that applies not just to you, but to all your business partners. All right, so once the policies are in place, it's time to move from theory to action. Steps 2 and 3 are where companies really start to actively hunt for risks and then, actually do something about them. Step 2 is really a 2-part deal. First, a company has to map out its entire operation to get that 30,000-foot view of where risks might be lurking. Think of it like creating a risk heat map for your business. Then, for any of those areas that are glowing red, they need to dive in and do a much deeper, more thorough assessment. And when they're doing these assessments, they really need to look at everything. We're talking about risks tied to their specific industry, the geographic locations of their partners, the kinds of products they make, even the business models of their suppliers. It's about getting a complete 360-degree view of potential trouble spots. Step 3 is where the rubber meets the road, and the directive makes a really critical distinction. If you find a potential problem, something that could happen, your job is to prevent or mitigate it. But if you find an actual, ongoing problem, the bar is set much higher. You are obligated to bring that impact to an end, or at the very least, minimize its damage as much as you can. And this really gets to the spirit of the whole directive. The goal isn't for companies to just cut and run at the first sign of a problem. Not at all. In fact, the CSDDD pushes companies to engage with their partners, to use their influence to fix things. Terminating a contract, that's seen as an absolute last resort, only when everything else has failed. So, you've set your policies, you've taken action, but the process is far from over. Steps 4 and 5 are all about making sure your efforts are actually working, and then being totally transparent about it. Due diligence is not a one-and-done kind of thing. It's a living, breathing process. Step 4 is all about monitoring. Companies have to constantly check if their measures are effective. This means a formal review at least once a year, and also anytime something big changes, like if they enter a new market or launch a major new product. And then you have to tell everyone what you're doing. Step 5 is all about public communication. Companies will have to publish an annual statement on their website that details their entire due diligence process, what they looked for, what they found, and what they did about it. The good news for businesses is that this is designed to line up with existing reporting rules, so it shouldn't be a mountain of brand new paperwork.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most powerful piece of this entire puzzle. What happens when, despite all best efforts, harm still occurs? Step 6 covers remediation and the very real consequences of failure. Now let's look at this definition of remediation, because it's so important. It isn't just about cutting a check or saying sorry. The goal is restoration. It's about trying to put the affected people or the environment back to the state they were in before the damage happened. That could be money, sure, but it could also be other actions.
And let's be crystal clear. This is not optional. If a company is found to have caused or even just contributed to an adverse impact, they are legally required to provide this remediation. This is what gives the directive real teeth and turns corporate responsibility from a PR talking point into a legal obligation. And just to show you how serious this is, look at this number, 5 years. That's the window of time that victims have to bring civil claims for damages against a company. It's a significant period that ensures accountability can't just be waited out. So when you boil it all down, the CSDD is pushing companies toward a future of radical transparency and total accountability. It's a whole new world. So the final question really isn't just about ticking boxes for compliance. It's about whether your business is fundamentally ready to operate this way. Is it?